The wagon creaked to a stop in front of Cooper's trading post, just as the sky turned the color of rusted iron. Wind curled through the dust, catching the hem of her dress as she climbed down, one hand on the belly that had become more burden than blessing. Her boots sank slightly into the dry earth. She winced. The pain in her lower back had grown sharper with each mile, but she said nothing. She hadn't said much for weeks. Harlan didn't help her down. He didn't look at her. He stayed perched on the wagon bench, reins slack in his hand like he wasn't quite gripping them at all. "You sure she'll be comfortable here?" he asked the storekeep without glancing at her. The man behind the barrels, Thomas Cooper, gave her a glance that was more curiosity than kindness. "Depends what you mean by comfortable. Ain't no spare room in back. I can clear space in the shed." Harlan shrugged like that was that. "She's tough." Mara Lynn didn't flinch. She'd grown used to being spoken of like something weathered, a tool left in the sun too long. Her hands rested on the curve of her belly, and she breathed in slow. The smell of tobacco, dust, and smoked jerky hung thick in the air. It all felt hollow somehow, like everything around her was made of dried husks. Harlan climbed down, boots hitting hard. He pulled his coat tighter and strode toward the trading post, not sparing her a word. She stood still until his figure vanished inside, and then, only then, she turned toward the post rail and sat. A long breath slipped out of her. The wood was cold beneath her palms. She didn't cry. She'd done that already, last week, when he told her the baby was bad luck. When he said 40 was too old to birth anything but grief. When he blamed her for the drought, for the failed cattle, for the way men stared at her belly with pity, as if she'd conjured hardship like a spell. He'd left off saying it was her fault they hadn't had children sooner. But she could hear it in the scrape of his silence. A few townsfolk wandered near, pretending not to look. One woman handed her a small cloth bundle, bread, still warm. Mara nodded, murmured thanks. The woman touched her shoulder gently, then was gone. Inside the store, voices rose. Words like trade and supply credit and done deal floated out through the open door. Mara watched a tumbleweed cross the road like it was trying to leave too. She thought of walking, just stepping down that dirt road and never stopping. But walking got harder each day now. Her ankles were swollen, and the weight of the child was beginning to bend her in ways she hadn't expected. The sun slid lower, setting the hills on fire. A shadow passed nearby, him, the man she'd seen earlier at the blacksmith's. Tall, long-legged, with a quiet about him like snow. His boots didn't clomp like the others. His eyes met hers for just a second, but there was no flinch, no judgment, just stillness. He passed by. She wondered if kindness always looked like silence first. Harlan emerged an hour later with a heavy bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't meet her eyes. "Cooper'll see you settled. I'll take the wagon on from here. Prospecting in Dakota." As if that explained it. "You're leaving me," she said, voice low, steady. Not a question, just a naming. Harlan hesitated, like he might say something else. But then he just nodded once, turned, and left her sitting there as the wheels groaned away. The child stirred inside her. Thomas Cooper came out wiping his hands on a rag. "Shed's behind the post. It's not much, but it'll keep the wind off you. Blankets there too." She nodded. "Thank you." He scratched his beard, looked at her with the unease of a man who didn't quite know where mercy fit in commerce. "I don't make a habit of talking in folks, you understand." "I'm not asking for charity," she said softly. He grunted. "Didn't think you were." She made her way to the shed. The boards creaked underfoot. There was straw in the corner, a broken rocking chair, and a smell of dried oats and rat droppings. It would do. Her knees popped as she knelt to arrange the blanket. Her back screamed, but she kept moving, folding the cloth into a makeshift cushion. That night the wind howled. Cold slipped through the cracks like knives. She huddled in the corner, one hand resting on her stomach. She whispered nothing, just lay awake with the child's soft movements inside her, like a heartbeat out of time. She didn't know what day it would come, only that she was not ready, and yet maybe more ready than she had been before. She remembered planting beans once years ago, with hands that still smelled of soap and rose water. The ground had been cruel then too, but the seed took root. Things grow in harsh places, if they have to. A mouse scurried across the rafters. Outside, a horse shifted and snorted. Then quiet. She closed her eyes. A knock came, not loud, more a tap, almost a breath. She sat up slowly, heart heavy. No one waited when she opened the shed door, but at her feet sat a tin lantern, newly lit, and beside it a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside, 2 apples and a slice of smoked venison. No note, no voice, just warmth offered without claim. She looked across the street. The blacksmith's place was dark, but there was a figure leaning against the well. The same man, quiet, still. He didn't move, didn't wave. But she felt seen. Mara closed the door gently, as if trying not to wake something fragile. In that dark, cold shed, she took a bite of the apple. It was tart, crisp, and real. And though her hand still trembled, and the weight of the child pressed against her spine, a strange peace crept in, like maybe this wasn't the end of her story after all. She breathed out. Somewhere, beyond the hills, the wind changed direction. Morning came pale and quiet, with frost veiling the window panes like breath made still. Mara rose from the straw floor before the sun had climbed, bones stiff, muscles aching from sleep that hadn't been restful. The apple core rested by the door, hollowed clean. She hadn't dared eat the meat, not all at once. She was learning to stretch small kindnesses, one for now, one for later. She stepped out into the cold, wrapped in the borrowed blanket. The wind had softened and the town, still tucked in shadows, felt like something holding its breath. He was there again, by the well, the same man. He was drawing up a pail with slow, even rhythm, shoulders rolled in a calm posture that didn't ask for anything, not even attention. He set the water down beside him and didn't look her way until she stepped off the porch. Then he did. Just once. Their eyes met. There was no startle, no glance away. Just a quiet recognition, as though they'd already been introduced by the silence of the night before. Mara nodded. He returned it, barely. Then he turned, picked up the pail, and walked toward the small bunkhouse beside the smithy. She didn't follow. She had no reason to. Yet she watched until he vanished behind the door. Inside Cooper's store, she swept the floor. The old man had grumbled when she'd offered to help, but not enough to stop her. Dust settled in every corner of that building like it had nowhere else to be. Each sweep of the broom felt like a reclaiming, of motion, of breath, of worth. Heard from the McAllen ranch, Cooper said, counting coins behind the counter. They need hands. Not a woman's job, though. I didn't ask for one, she said, not unkindly. He blinked at her. Well, still, thought you ought to know. He didn't speak after that. She didn't need him to. By noon, the town had stirred. A wagon rattled past, and 3 children ran by with sticks, shouting over some game. A dog barked. Life, simple, indifferent, resumed around her. When she stepped out, the sun had melted the frost, leaving muddy streaks on the planks. She sat on the store stoop, hands resting on her lap, listening. A voice behind her made her spine tighten. Not harsh, just unexpected. You'll need better boots. Cold will come back by night. She turned. It was him again. Closer now. His voice was rough around the edges, like it hadn't been used much lately. But there was a steadiness in it. No mockery. No intent. Just a simple truth spoken aloud. She looked down at her worn shoes, the leather cracked from seasons of neglect. I know, she said. He nodded. That was all. He stood there, as if waiting to see if there'd be more. But when there wasn't, he offered a small gesture, a wrapped bundle from his coat pocket. She hesitated. Food, he said. Fresh. She took it with care. Bread, still warm. A slice of cheese. No flourish, no words tied to it. Thank you. He tipped his hat and turned. Walked toward the blacksmith's again, back straight, steps even. Wait, she said, surprising herself. He stopped. Not sharply. Just enough to let the air between them shift. You live here? I passed through, he replied. For now. His voice was the kind that didn't waste syllables. The kind that invited no assumptions. Why help me? She asked quietly. He paused a long moment before saying, "Because you look like someone who doesn't ask." Then he left her standing there, the bread warm in her hand. That evening, as the sun painted the hills with faded gold, she saw him again. He was carving something with a pocket knife outside the smithy, a bit of driftwood smoothed into a shape she couldn't yet name. He didn't look up when she passed. Didn't need to. The townsfolk had begun to whisper. About her. About him. Not cruelly, not yet. Just the idle buzz of folks who needed a story to chew on. A woman cast aside, a man with no past. Name's Calder, Mrs. Whitlow told her that evening, folding linens beside the stove. He don't talk much. Lost folk, I think. Maybe a wife. Maybe a brother in the war. He came quiet, stays quiet. But he brings my boy candy every Sunday. Don't tell nobody. Mara listened, but said little. She felt the baby roll again, low and strong. The ache it left behind lingered like sorrow after a song. The shed grew colder at night. Calder didn't come back. But he left things. A stack of wood against the door. A new blanket, soft, folded with a piece of dried lavender tucked inside. Each gesture felt like a word never spoken. And slowly she began to speak back, not with thank you notes or disascensions, but with the way she swept a path from her door to his. The way she left a stitched patch of cloth hanging on the well, with no purpose except color. He never asked her what happened. Never mentioned Harlan. Never asked about the child, or the bruises beneath her ribs that healed slower than bone. She found comfort in that. One afternoon, after she'd mended 3 coats and scrubbed her hands raw in the trough, Calder walked by. He stopped near the fence and looked out at the hills. The air smelled of smoke and soap. "You're staying?" he asked. "I haven't been asked to leave," she answered. "You don't need permission." The wind caught her hair and tangled it across her cheek. She brushed it back, thinking how odd it felt to be seen without being measured. Then, just as gently, he said, "If you need help, I'll be near." She nodded once. "I know." And that was all. That night, she dreamt of a road unrolling across open fields. No end in sight, but beside her, always a second set of steps. By morning, she found a carving on her doorstep. A small wooden horse, rough around the edges, but balanced, whole. She picked it up like it might break, but it didn't. Nothing good had ever arrived for her quickly. Nothing lasting had ever come with promises. But this quiet man who said almost nothing, who showed up with food and blankets instead of questions. He was the first thing in a long time that didn't ask her to be anything but exactly what she was. Tired, pregnant, alone, and still worth helping. The sun rose warm across the rooftops, spilling gold over the church steeple and the trail beyond. She held the horse close to her chest and stood at the edge of the porch. The world hadn't changed, but something inside her had begun to shift. It wasn't love, not yet. It was shelter. And it was enough to keep walking toward whatever came next. The first snow fell before dawn, soft and unhurried. It dusted the rooftops like powdered sugar and turned the muddy paths of town into pale ribbons. Mara stood in the doorway of the shed, blanket draped over her shoulders, the baby's weight anchored low and heavy. She watched the flakes swirl beneath the lanterns, listening to the hush they cast across the waking world. There was peace in that quiet, a kind of holding. She let herself feel it. Inside her, something had begun to shift, not just the child, but her breath, her bones, her sense of space in this world. Where once she had folded herself smaller to stay unnoticed, she now stood just a little taller. Not proud, just rooted. Mrs. Whitlow had given her a new pair of wool gloves. The fingers were too long, but warm. "You remind me of my sister," the old woman said. "She kept surviving when everyone said she couldn't." Don't make a habit of listening to the wrong voices, Mara. Wrong voices. God, how many years had she done just that? The town was quieter these days, but not cold. People had begun to see her, not as spectacle, but as someone who might be staying. The whispers had faded. Children waved when they passed. She'd sewn a dozen buttons, mended old coats, swept porches no one asked her to. Mara was poor, but no longer pitted. She belonged to the earth in a new way. Calder passed most mornings around the same time. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes not. Once, he handed her a book with half its cover torn. Another time, a fresh apple tucked in a cloth napkin. No words, no explanations. He simply gave, then left. She never asked why. She didn't need to. And when she left small things on his windowsill, a red thread, a wooden thimble, once a page torn from an old hymnal, he never spoke of them, but the items disappeared, and something new would take their place. One evening, as the snow thickened and her ankles ached from standing too long, she found herself outside the blacksmith place. Calder stood under the awning, sanding a plank of wood, the sound soft as breath. She didn't speak right away, just stood with her hands pressed to the small of her back, watching the flakes catch in his hair. "I used to think quiet men were hiding something," she said. He paused, looked up. His face was half-shadowed, but she could see the flicker of a smile. "And now?" he asked. "Now I think some people just don't waste air." He chuckled low. "Not all silence is the same." "No," she agreed. "It's not." He set the plank aside. "Come in from a cold." She hesitated. "I'll stay near the door," he added, as if reading what went unspoken. Inside it was warm. Not tidy, but welcoming. A fire burned in the stove, casting long shadows. Tools hung in orderly rows. On the table, a half-finished wooden rattle, its shape worn smooth with care. "I carve," he said simply, "when I don't know what else to do." Mara looked at the rattle, her fingers tingling. "I lost a child once," she said. He didn't flinch, just nodded. His name was Isaac, born too early. I held him for 3 hours before he went. Harlan didn't. He never really saw him. Or me. The fire cracked. "I buried that boy myself. With a spoon." Harlan said the ground wasn't soft enough for a spade. Calder didn't interrupt. Didn't offer sympathy she hadn't asked for. He just listened. The kind of listening that stitched the broken pieces without needing to name them. She exhaled. "This one. I don't know what to hope for." He picked up the rattle, ran a thumb over its grain. "Then maybe just hope for the morning. One morning at a time." She looked at him. "Do you believe in second chances?" His gaze met hers, clear, steady. "I believe some stories don't start until the second act." They stood like that for a while, two quiet shapes in the golden glow. She didn't stay long. Her back hurt, and the baby had begun its usual evening storm inside her. But when she left, he didn't follow. He simply said, "There's tea if you ever want to sit longer." That night, the snow deepened. The shed held warmth like a secret. Mara slept curled around her belly, the carved horse by her side. In her dream, the child had a voice. It laughed, high and bright, chasing birds through green fields. She woke with tears on her face and didn't wipe them away. The next day, she mended Calder's coat. Not because he asked, but because the seam by the cuff was frayed, and she needed something to do with her hands. She left it folded on his porch with a sprig of sage and a note tucked into the pocket. "This winter's long. Don't let it swallow you whole." He didn't reply, but a new blanket appeared in her shed that night, thick, stitched, clearly made by hand. And beneath it, tucked inside the fold, a single sentence on torn paper. "Some fires don't roar. They smolder. But they keep you alive just the same." Mara read it twice, then held it to her heart. She was beginning to believe in warmth again. Not the kind that came from touch or promises or sudden sparks, but the kind built quietly, word by word, kindness by kindness. Something inside her, long dormant, buried under years of silence and survival, began to glow. It wasn't joy yet, but it was something close, and it was hers. The wind that morning wasn't kind. It came sharp from the east, stirring the snow into needles that bit at skin and eyes. Mara pulled her shawl tighter as she crossed the street, boots crunching over frost-hardened ruts. She was headed to Mrs. Whitlow's with a basket of mended gloves and a slow ache in her hips, but something in the air made her pause. Voices, low, rough, curled around the corner from Cooper's trading post. Men. Strangers, mostly, but one voice struck her like a drop stone. Too familiar. Too near. She didn't need to see him to know. Harlan. She stood still for a moment, stomach tightening. The child kicked hard, as if sensing the change. Her breath grew shallow. Then she stepped forward, not hurriedly, but with that careful, steady pace she'd learned in her worst years. If he meant to see her broken, he'd have to look harder. He stood near the door, wrapped in a heavy coat, eyes scanning the street like a man already measuring what he'd claim. 2 others flanked him, men from the old mining routes, by the looks of their gear and filth-lined faces. Opportunists smelling blood. Harlan spotted her. His mouth curled into something that tried to pass for a smile, but there was no warmth in it, just calculation. "Well now," he said, stepping forward. "You look different, Mara. Rounder. Older." She didn't respond. He moved closer, lifting a hand like he might touch her belly. She stepped back. He laughed, still full of fire. "Huh? I figured it might have gone out by now. What do you want?" "Want?" He turned to his companions. "You hear that? She asks what I want. Like I don't got claim to her." "You left," she said plainly. "I loaned you," he snapped. "And I'm talking you back." News came in from Cheyenne territory. Land claim got approved. Guess whose name's still on it? Yours. As my wife. You sold me for 3 sacks of grain. "Doesn't matter," he said. "A man can undo such things. Law don't follow sentiment, Mara." She looked past him to Cooper, who stood in the doorway looking small. "You let him back?" Cooper swallowed. "Ain't my place to bar a man from town. Not unless there's blood." Harlan smiled again. "See? I got every right. And I'm feeling generous. We can make this easy. You ride with me. We go to that new patch of earth and start over. This baby, hell, we can say it's mine. No one will question." "It's not yours," she said quietly. "No, but it'll work in my favor," he said, eyes narrowing. "Folks like sympathy. Pregnant woman. Fresh homestead. People donate, vote, help build. You've still got some use left in you." His words landed like spit on skin. From the edge of the square came a slow, deliberate sound. Boots on wood. Calder. He didn't speak. Not yet. He simply stepped into view, hands at his sides, coat heavy with snow. His presence shifted the shape of the street, as if even the cold backed away from him. Harlan turned, brows lifting. "Well now, the blacksmith? Or whatever you are. You got business here." Calder didn't answer. His eyes settled on Mara. She exhaled slowly, chin lifting. "You said once I don't need permission." He nodded. "You don't." Harlan laughed, loud and shrill. "This the man you took up with? Lord, Mara, I thought even you had better sense. He got land? Money? Can he even hold a gun?" Calder stepped forward. Then, softly, he said, "She's already mine." The street went still. Not a shout. Not a challenge. Just truth, dropped like a stone in still water. Harlan's face twisted. "You can't just say that. You think words make it so." Calder shrugged. "No, but I didn't have to buy her, either." The men beside Harlan shifted, uncertain. Townsfolk began to gather, not close, but watching from porches and windows. Mrs. Whitlow stood by the bakery, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Mara stepped between them. "Harlan," she said, "I'm not your property, not your mule, not your paper wife for land politics. I'm done being spoken for." "You think this town's going to protect you?" he spat. "No," she said, "but I will." And she turned her back on him, deliberately. Her hand brushed Calder's arm as she passed. He didn't take it, didn't clutch or claim. He just walked with her, slow and steady, the 2 of them moving through the snow, as if nothing else needed saying. Behind them, Harlan cursed. Kick snow. But no one followed. No one offered him aid. The fire that had begun to smolder inside her weeks ago burned brighter now. Quiet, clean, unashamed. She had not been rescued. She had simply stood. And that made all the difference. They left town just after dawn. The sky had softened to that shade between pearl and pewter, where the stars were gone, but the sun hadn't yet claimed the world. The frost still clung to fences and railings, and the road ahead shimmered with thin ice that would melt by midday. Mara sat on the wagon's front bench, her hands resting gently on her swollen stomach, the blanket Calder had made wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth mourning. Calder drove slow. He didn't speak much, but his presence was steady, like the creak of the wheels or the rhythm of the horse's hooves. It wasn't silence between them, it was quiet. The good kind. The kind that let a woman breathe without apology. They passed the last fence post before the land opened wide. No more buildings, no signboards, just hills that rolled like sleeping beasts and a sky that stretched to forever. Somewhere out there, he said, was the cabin. He'd built it with his brother long before the war and hadn't gone back since. Why now? She asked, voice soft but firm. Calder didn't answer right away. He let the wind say something first. Then, finally, because you needed a place. And I had one. She turned to look at him, her eyes searching. That's not a reason to share it. His jaw flexed. Then he said, you never asked to be saved. You just needed someone to stop walking past. She looked away. The child shifted. Her ribs ached. But somewhere in that ache was peace. The cabin sat at the edge of a shallow valley, nestled among cottonwoods and thick pines. Smoke rose from its chimney before they even reached it. Calder had ridden out a week earlier, left the stove set, blankets aired, windows patched. He hadn't told her. He hadn't needed to. He helped her down from the wagon without touching her more than needed. His hands didn't linger. His gaze didn't assume. Inside, the warmth hit her like memory. Wood smoke, baked bread, pine resin. The table was set with simple bowls. A kettle simmered low. He'd even fixed the rocking chair. This yours? She asked, brushing her fingers along the mantel. It was, he said. Now it's ours. If you want it to be. She paused at that. Not because she doubted the offer, but because no one had ever asked her what she wanted before. Not truly. Not without strings. She turned to him. I don't want to be claimed, she said. I know. I don't want promises made out of guilt. I wouldn't insult you like that. I'm not easy, she added. Not gentle, not soft the way some men want. There's too much in me now that won't bend anymore. Calder nodded. Then I'm lucky, because soft things can shatter. She laughed, a small sound, rough and real. Then she sat. Slowly. The baby kicked again, low and hard. Her breath caught. He noticed. Close. Maybe, she said. It's been moving more. Less room, I guess. Already what we'll need. You've done this before? No, he said. But I can learn. She watched him move around the room, gathering cloths, water, warming bricks in the stove. He wasn't fast, but he was careful, intentional. That night, they sat by the fire, Mara in the rocking chair, Calder whittling something she couldn't yet see. The silence held them like a blanket. Not much needed saying. Still, she looked over and asked, why did you say it? He didn't look up. When Harlan tried to take me back, she said. You said I was already yours. Why? He exhaled through his nose, as if the words were buried deep. Then he said, because when I look at you, I don't see a woman who needs permission to be loved. I see someone who's already chosen herself. I just wanted to walk beside her if she'd let me. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her hand found his, rough and warm. The labor came before dawn. No warning beyond a single, sharp jolt that woke her like thunder. She called out once. He was there, before the echo faded. No panic. No wasted movement. Just water, towels, hands steady beneath candlelight. Hours passed in gritted teeth and muffled groans. She bled. She wept. But she did not break. Calder knelt beside her the whole time, never flinching, never leaving. When she cursed the pain, he whispered, you're strong. When she said she couldn't do it, he answered, you already are. And when the baby came, red and screaming and stubborn, he caught it with trembling hands. A girl. Mara collapsed back, sweat cooling on her brow, tears already drying on her cheeks. Calder wrapped the child in cloth and held her close. He didn't say she was beautiful. He said she's safe. And Mara, blinking at the small bundle now resting against her chest, whispered, her name is Susan. After my mother. Calder nodded. Susan then. Snow began to fall again that morning. Light. Slow. Mara sat beside the window hours later, child asleep on her shoulder. Calder worked outside, chopping wood. Every movement he made spoke of peace. Purpose. She had not been rescued. She had been seen. She had not been won. She had been met. And maybe that's what love really was. Not fire and fury, not claims or kisses, but the quiet decision to stand beside someone when no one else would. As the fire crackled low, and Susan stirred in her sleep, Mara whispered into the hush, "We made it." And somewhere beyond the window, through the stillness and snow, the world whispered back, "Yes." Some roads don't need maps. Only two people willing to walk them.